speak Spanish. I live in Tokyo for many years.
Right. No, that's just the recording kicking in. That's no problem.
Okay.
So how's your Japanese?
Not that good, being honest with you. Not that good. I lived there for 6 years now, and in Tokyo, and all my colleagues, because we have an importer in Japan. So I also do like wine import business from all around the world. And
Mikuni wine, right? That is your
Mikuni
own
wine.
importer.
Yes, Mikuni wine, yeah. We have 100 colleagues there, 100 Japanese colleagues and me. So,
oh, that's amazing. Mikuni is very famous. I've actually come across them in my time in Australia and around. I actually know of them as well. They're very famous.
Yeah.
Such a hard market. It seems to me one of the hardest to break into.
Very difficult, yeah.
But there's some plus sides to it. The fulfillment seems to be quite simple, and great customers once you have them. That's been my overall opinion.
Once you have them, but it's difficult.
That's the key.
That's the key. Yeah. It has been a very long journey. I went there when we purchased the importer there that existed in Japan for a while. Yeah. And we were selling no kune at the time. So they started like the brand from scratch there.
Yeah.
It took a while.
It took a while to break in.
Exactly.
Yeah. There's a question from Wang. What glass is best for Rioja? I guess Tempranillo, so Shiraz, right?
Sorry?
What's the best glass for Rioja Reds? There's a question in the chat room.
Can I see it? The base what? Glass.
He's asking what type of glass is the best to use for drinking Rioja wines. In other words,
okay, for the glass. Yeah, for the Tempranillo. I'm using here like a standard Riedel as of now.
Okay. So maybe the standard Shiraz, not the Bordeaux one, the big glass.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
A standard Shiraz is fine.
Yeah. And you know, the one thing I'll talk about it in a sec when we start. The one thing that's quite interesting, Maria, is and Pablo, the notion there's no rule about Tempranillo as part of the Gran Reserva component. Obviously, it seems to be in every Gran Reserva I've ever found, but there's nothing in my research that says it has to have Tempranillo in it to be a Gran Reserva. Is that right?
There is not like a, how can I say, like a regulation.
A law,
yeah. There is not a law itself. Actually, we produce this Gran Reservas with another grades. Time by time, for example, Garnacha is getting popular. In the past, it was very well like used for blending, but time by time, it is acquiring like a, its own personality and stuff. Actually, Garnacha, for example, is a grape varietal that has its origin on Spain, but it had to become like proved good by its own in another famous region like Rhone Valley or Languedoc-Roussillon, till we start like feeling confident to produce our own 100% Garnacha wines.
It seems a lot of the, I'm thinking of the Contino, for example. Garnacha has been very popular with our database, but it seems that the super high altitude producers are getting a lot of success with Garnacha in particular. So Comunidad de Madrid, etc., those sort of places are getting enormous attention. Yeah. All right, it's 7 o'clock. Muchas gracias, amigos, or should we say los borrachos? I'm not sure what the right phrase is. I'd like to welcome Pablo and Maria to this journey tonight. We're going to take. Maria is from Cune and Pablo comes from Vinícola Real. So it's going to be great that you don't have to tolerate my groaning on all night. It's mostly over to these guys. So what we're going to do now is flip over into the presentation, and we'll go from there. Right, just going to, Lou, if I can ask you if you don't mind to keep an eye on the chat room, because I won't be able to do it from where we are here. So looking at 6 tonight, what I've decided to do in terms of the lineup, guys, is to start with the oldest to the most recent. I racked my brains trying to find a perfect match from a geography point of view, and what I ended up finding is that they're all so distinctive. The best way forward is to look at them this way. So the 3 pillars of Terroir, and it's something that I found increasingly complicated to get my arms around over time. This notion of climate, geology, and psychology, these 3 components that seem to be equally important to the production to the attainment of an understanding of what terroir actually is. I think when I started my career, you'd ask, I'd talk to the French, right? And I'd say, what is terroir? And they'd shake their shoulders and say, it's just terroir. It's something you just need to absorb. It's so it's I guess something that I'll never totally understand. But I think the Pascal Chatonnet description is probably one of the most lyrical for me. The interaction between a specific environment, its climate and geological profile, and then of course human psychology and culture, which gives rise to a very distinctive personality. And hopefully by the end of these 30-45 minutes, we'll have a little understanding of those variances and what they've done in terms of coming into the final wine in the glass. So Gran Reserva must be aged for a total of 5 years, at least 24 months of which must be in oak, and at least the same amount of time in the bottle. I think this is the real market edge that I find as a salesman at the moment, marketing wines from around the world. This late release, this holding back of wines out of Spain is increasingly creating enormous reference and reverence to the new generations of people who are coming up and drinking wine. When you're having to buy a 2020 Cabernet from one place or Shiraz or Grenache, and then the current release out of Spain is the 16. It starts to make a convincing argument that there's real value out of Spain for what you're looking at. The Gran Reserva also only in outstanding vintages. And from what my reading seems to indicate is that in a general sense, the Spanish wine industry seems to be moving away from oak as the predominant determinant of what goes into the Grenaches, or it's less of an impact in the final personality of the wine. And there's much more of a focus on microclimates and singular sites. So Vinicula Real, this is one of the ones I need to introduce to you guys tonight. Let me just see where that noise is coming from. Forgive me for 1 minute. Right. So 85% Tempranillo, 10% Graziano, 5% Garnacha. One of the things I was asking the guys as we were waiting to start tonight is there a law that Tempranillo has to be part of Gran Reserva? There's nothing in the writings, but very obviously Tempranillo seems to be the dominant varietal in everything that I've ever looked at in researching Gran Reservas. In the Vinicula, I think it's called Dos de Centos Monges. Is that the right pronunciation for 200 monks? Dos de Centos, I think so. I hope so. So I hope they forgive. Well, close enough, Maria. So 45-year-old vines, so relatively young vines in the context of Rioja. They have 2 stages that they approach with the production of the Gran Reserva, fermented for 13 days in conical French wooden vats, and then a 28-day fermentation on skins. They're very focused on their sites, and this is one of the first things that sort of makes my ears prick up. This notion that they look very, very closely at the production of site expression. The Larade plots from granite clay soils with this reddish clay silt and a rocky depth. I would imagine that a little bit like limestone in terms of geology, that granite rocky component under the soil is giving great drainage, which is so very important. Then the Las Vegas plots, which are more calcareous than clayey. Generally speaking, in the region that the Vinicolo Real comes from, it's most famous for an iron-rich content in the clay. Here, there's not that much reference to it, so something of a slightly aberrant or different from the norm in this particular area. Rocky subsoils allowing the roots to grow deep, and an average gradient of 30 degrees. Actually, whilst it doesn't sound so much, I have a feeling that when one's harvesting, that could be quite a chunk of gradient to have to deal with when one's bringing off the vines. They're at 520 meters above sea level. Miguel Angel Rodriguez started this winery again not so very long ago. It's on the original site of a monastery, and today the cellar door itself and the winery are deep in the catacombs subterranean. Those of you who were on the tasting last year, or was it earlier this year, with Vinicolo Real, we went through all the wines with them. The overall component that I found when we were doing the Vinicolo Real before was there seems to be this really soft, gentle kind of nuance through all of their reds, and in particular this one. I don't know what everyone else thinks on the call, but my impression of that as a 2005 is enormously youthful still. Let me see if I can pull up the chat. See a lot. Questions from the people. Oh, okay, Kevin, we'll get to you in a bit. I'm seeing quite a lot of youthfulness in the wine for 2005. If I was doing this in a blind tasting, I would probably pick it as a younger wine. Miguel's philosophy in terms of knowing, I guess this is the philosophical end of what they're doing in the manufacture of this particular style, this particular label, is listening to the earth, not getting too involved in the process, allowing and coaxing the vines to come to their particular fruition. So let's move to the next slide and ask Pablo to talk about this one.
Okay, so Robert, now you leave me in a really high level.
It's always good.
I don't know if I can reach the standard.
Thank you. Maybe you can
well, guys, thank you for coming.
Yeah.
And well, I think they're all fantastic wines, the one we're tasting today. So I hope maybe Valduero has this difference than it is in Ribera del Duero instead of Rioja. So in Ribera del Duero, we are more strict about the varietals that can be used. So it has to be at least always 75% Tempranillo. And then this will use the 100% instead. This is because Yolanda, who is the winemaker, she only thinks that the Tempranillo is the only varietal suited to the hard conditions where the vines are located. We are located over 800 meters of altitude. Ribera del Duero is relatively a new appellation and coming compared to Rioja. So she decided to copy the winemaking styles of Burdeos and Rioja. Actually, Cune is one of the references she always uses as well as the
that's
style.
Great.
And so 40 years ago, when she started the project, she decided to put vines where others were not willing to do so because it was quite risky. So she went to the slopes, in the highest altitudes, and we always have this chance to lose the vintage. So it's like a risk that it's always there. 2013, we lost the vintage, so we didn't bottle any wines. And for this Gran Reserva, we are using 2011, which is maybe the second best vintage in the last 15 years, being the best in 2010. So basically, the philosophy of Yolanda is that the Gran Reserva is not made Gran Reserva through the process of oaking, of the process of the bottle. It's just the best quality that we have for the best vintages. We just give it the conditions for it to develop until it gets to its full potential. It's like having a young kid with a lot of talent for drawing. So instead of giving it coloring books, we just give it an oil and a canvas and enough time to practice. So this one in particular, it's quite easy when Yolanda meets technical team after the harvest, they try the quality, and if it's good enough, they will decide to start the production of Gran Reservas only in the best vintages. And then we choose the best grapes, and it's because it's only 100% temperature, you have to choose also which kind of oak we are using during the racking, trying to make the profile desired. So basically here we're looking at also at a wine done with 2 bunches per plant. So that means it's like 2 plants to make 1 bottle. So we're never looking at the production cost. We're always trying to achieve the best quality possible and try to make a signature wine and try to differentiate ourselves by quality and not try to compete in this segment. It's all low boost vineyards also. And well, I like also to say this a small piece of philosophy from Yolanda, which is that we always try to focus on the human doing the wines. We don't think that the machines are capable or the procedures really technical to make a good wine. It's always hand harvested, low bus, small production, small control of the wine, what allows us to have this product, plus the experience of Yolanda of almost 40 years, of course, doing this profile of wines. Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. I think that this is, of the 6 wines we're looking at tonight, this is the highest altitude. Maria, I think your Imperial is 750, right? Or 720 meters by comparison in terms of altitude. So we're looking at super high. I mean, but there are vineyards in Ribeiro that go higher. But this is a really interesting example of what you get when you're looking at that, the really pointy end of the altitude scale. I'm also blown away by the economics. 2 plants to a bottle. I mean, it's I don't know how Yolanda's paying for her children's school fees.
When I first saw it by myself,
yeah,
I just say I want to join this project.
Yeah,
it was like anorexic. Crazy for me. Blows my mind to this winemaking way.
I think that if I compare the 200 Monges to the Valduero, there's definitely more intensity. There's a linearity about the wine that goes from beginning to end. I can't see the chat room, so I can't see what. Well, I'm sure the others will be contributing there. But there's a very strong definition, and the Monges, by comparison, is a little softer and in sort of maybe geographical, in visual terms, a bit rounder and softer in the mid palate, whereas the Valduero is it's on a mission. The front, middle, and back is fantastic. I love the length of the wine. It's very impressive, very intense.
I will say it's a wine that, despite having 11 years already of aging, we try to leave them as long as possible, because I think these wines they are prepared and done in order to be kept under the right circumstances by collectors, and collecting these good vintages like 2011 and just keeping them as long as possible and let it develop.
It's a real thumbs up. It's delicious wine. Thank you. So on to the Muga. This is me again. I guess I cut my teeth on Gran Reservas by starting with the Muga. I really fell very much in love with there's a kind of glossiness about the wine as a personality that I always seem to recognize year after year. There's a dark sort of brooding gloss, almost oiliness to the wine. So Having tasted this once or twice, I've drunk more of the 11 than I have of this 14. So 60% Tempranillo, 20% Garnacha, and then 10 and 10 Mazuelo and Graciano. We're in Rioja Alta, so if you guys can think of the map, I should have put it in there. It's a bit silly of me. Rioja Alta is the furthest west from Haro, and the most eastern, getting the benefits of continental climate, the Atlantic, the Mediterranean. There's a lot of breezes. It's a really dynamic kind of place. When, initially when I first started drinking Riojan wines, I always had this notion of hot, unrelenting heat all the time, and by no means is Rioja Alta about that. Muga is one of the wineries that Lou and I have actually visited, and it's quite distinctive in terms of it's one of the very few wineries that have their own cooperage. In other words, they're actually making the barrels themselves, the casks themselves, in the winery, and they're very proud of it. I guess when one thinks about it, control of the process from beginning to end, including the actual oak production, has a massive role in what the wine actually looks like. It is definitely a large part to play in the notion of terroir and the notion of where the wines come from. They're very strong on that's what's defining them. So I guess as a philosophy, they are looking at how that oak is driving the personality of the wines. But I'm sure there's more to it than that. I'm just very hard to find anything too esoteric in my research of reading them. Yeah, that's sort of.
Robert, I came in a little bit late. I mean, is there I only have the wine label, so which one is which?
We're now on wine number 3, the Muga. You'll see in the chat box. In the chat box, there's a summary of all 6 wines. No problems.
All right. Sorry.
That's okay. So going back to this 14, I'm thinking about the 11, which I looked at maybe about 2 weeks back. Obviously softer. I guess, Pablo, would you agree that 14 as a vintage is possibly not quite as good as 11? You were mentioning 11 and 10 as the premium.
I think there's actually, and I can send you, Robert, later on. We have like a control. All appellations always say the vintage is either really good or excellent, or they will never say bad, right? But Tim Atkins has rated each winery separately, and I can send that to you. So let's say 2014 was much better than 2013.
Oh yeah.
I think it was better than 2012.
Right.
But worse than 11 and 10.
Yeah. I know that there's quite a lot of 14 that has come into the market slowly now into Singapore, and I quite like it. But for me, 11 seems to me more structured, more sculptured, a bit more finesse. That seems to be the overriding philosophy that I'm finding from these wines. I think that though, that all notwithstanding, the personality of Muga is there. It's very clear, showing that big, heavy glossiness. I think it's way too soon, the 14, in terms of drinking. I definitely bury this for a few more years, but there's no question that what Suckling's recognizing it in the 95 points area is value indeed, at 550 meters altitude. So over to the Cunes. Let me just and ask.
Rob, before you move on, there's just a couple of comments about the Muga 11. If you remember the 11, we had a lot of it and we sold a lot of it.
Yeah.
What do you reckon? How would you compare the 11 to the 14? I've got my own thoughts, but
I don't think it's as good. I think that the 11 was so phenomenal. You know what probably makes it the best Ennio Prado I'd ever have, that I can ever remember having of the 11, is this. They've kept that house style of that big, no holds barred, muscular Rioja, but there's a beautiful cashmere, silky, soft sense of refinement about it. Now, whether the 14 eventually evolves into that, the way Tim's talking in the chat room, whether it actually becomes more of that over time is yet to be seen. But I'm betting not. I'm betting that this 14 might not be as sexy as 11, but we can, we can't always be as good as we want to be. But I agree with you as well. It's showing riper, right? And broad is a really good definition, and by comparison to the first two.
I think, well, compared to the first two, it's certainly broader and riper. For want of a better word, more there's more sunshine in that glass. Yeah. But if I remember rightly, my favourite of the Mugas was the 10. I thought the 10 had everything going for it. The 11 was in a similar vein to the 10. This 14 is a little bit different. I agree. I think it's a slightly different style. They must have been. I think they're probably dealing with riper grapes.
Yeah, that was my first instinct. That it's you're looking at something that's just a little bit riper and maybe more heat.
Yeah, that's what I reckon. Maybe it'll come around, but I don't know if it's got the components that the 10 and 11
I'm not sure, and the tannins that I'm picking up on it as well at this stage relative to when we had the 10s and 11s, they're not as refined. So yeah, Tim, I think that from a ratings point of view, it was held up as the best they've had in a long time.
Anyway, sorry, move on.
Okay, on to Maria and the three Cunes. Maria.
Okay. Same as Pablo, thank you so much for allowing me to be in here. And let's start with, we are going to taste today 2 different sub-regions and 2 different vintages as well. We will start with Rioja Alta. Rioja Alta is located in the western side of Rioja. Rioja has 3 sub-regions in total, Alta, Baja, and Alavesa. This Rioja Alta sub-region has a moderate continental with a touch of Atlantic climate, as you explained before, and the soils are mostly clay, rich on iron and mixed with limestones. Due to these varying different elevations that we can find here in Rioja Alta, the wines produced can have a really great structure and very high in acidity. Then Imperial Gran Reserva is our flagship wine in Cune. This vintage 2015 was a pretty good one. I cannot actually say, same as Pablo, that it was like the second, not first or second best in the last 50 years, but it actually has a great scores. This wine has 97 James Suckling, 94 Wine Spectator, 94 Wine Enthusiast, 96 Tim Atkins. Is actually when I tasted wine and when I give it for tasting with the people, this is for me like the textbook classic Rioja Gran Reserva. It is made from we celebrated the 100th vintage last year of this one. It is produced since 1920s and is the first Spanish wine recognized as the top one of Wine Spectator. The grape varietals that we use here are 85% Tempranillo, but blended with Graciano on a 10% percentage, and Mazuelo, and the altitude is, as you explained, around 700 meters. The wines are produced in our best vineyards in Rioja Alta and are set aside for the production of, we only produce for this Rioja Gran Reserva. It mainly comes from 2 plots, Barbarroja and Antoñanza, and all the vines there are above 40 years old. The vines are brush strain, dry farm, and the plots are pretty small, like Burgundy style. The soils are dry with areas of river pebbles, a low in organic matter, and situated on gentle south-facing slopes. And the result is a very deep ruby color with sherry notes.
Maria, by comparison to what Pablo's yields, what sort of yields per vine are you getting for the Imperial?
Can you give me 1 second? I need to connect the laptop.
Okay. All right, no problem. And the other question that came to mind was, I recall the Cune Imperiale getting Wine Spectator Wine of the Year, possibly about 10 years ago. It was certainly my formative years of drinking Rioja wine.
No,
yeah, in
more
2013. Yeah,
13. Okay.
it was 2013. Yeah, on the vintage 2004.
Okay, that's it. 2004. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so sorry, back to you.
So yeah, the result is a super, super, super elegant wine. It doesn't have like a very strong tannins, despite its complexity. Red food, liquorized thick, very deep nose as well, and it's very smooth and silky on the mouth. As I told you before, for me, it's like the textbook Rioja, how it should be, and it's a very balanced. And even with a huge capability for aging. The other day I tasted in a winery last week with some Australian colleagues at 1928. It was okay. Amazing. And yeah, it is like a
party at your house next time. That's amazing. Sorry.
So yeah, this is Imperial, and yeah, we are moving now from the sub-region of Rioja Alta, moving to Rioja Alavesa. Rioja Alavesa is another wine. It's another one. It's the smallest of the sub-regions in Rioja. It also experiences a moderate continental climate with a touch of the Atlantic Ocean because it's pretty close, also located in the north side. And it is the wettest and coolest region out of the three Riojan sub-region. The soils are different. We found much more limestone and clay in Rioja Alta, and here in Rioja Alavesa is much more chalky. And usually, like the vines are planted in terraces. Normally, the wines of this region tend to be a little bit lighter in body compared with Rioja Alta, but it's not the case. And you will see with the two wines that we are about to taste. So let's start with Viña Real. Viña Real is the same vintage, okay? We are going to experience during this tasting, like the difference of the two sub-regions, Alta and Alavesa, because it's exactly the same climate. And actually the plots that we use for this wine production are not that far away from the ones that we use for Imperial. Also, excellent score, 96 James Suckling, but also 95 Tim Atkins, 92 Wine Spectators. The philosophy, which is pretty important, as you described at the beginning of your presentation, is pretty important. We launched this winery in the 1920s. Most of the grapes, all the grapes are produced around the region of El Ciego, in the heart of Rioja Alavesa. And for us here, like the master knowledge of the blending is the key of the personality of the wines. Two words always define the wines from Viña Real: character and elegance. Are a little bit like stronger, a little bit more rude compared with Imperial, but still it has this touch that it is a characteristic of CVNE production wines, which is the elegance, but it's a little bit more rude, more shocking when you taste it. The grape varietals are, the blend is slightly different. Now we find higher percentage of Tempranillo, 95%, but it has a touch of Graciano, only 5%, that gives this punch to wine. The altitude is from 500 and 600 meters. As you can see, even like the bottle shape is it's different. It's more like we use always like a Bordeaux bottle for CVNE production, and for this winery we always use like the Burgundy style because it reminds us more like the production style. The region where the plots are, as I mentioned before, in La Guardia, the sub-region of the sub-location of El Ciego. Also all vintage, all vines to produce this wine, not as old as the Imperial ones, but still above 30 years. And the result that we can see is like a little bit more like a deep in tannin, stronger in color, a lot of nuances of sherry, and still elegant, but more intense, as I mentioned before. And now in the nose, a lot of spicy notes, black pepper, with a touch of the fine wood that we use. We use here both in 50% percentage, American and French oak. It has a very rich fruit, rich touches of fruit in the aftertaste. It's a very white wine in the mouth and with a great structure and amazing for aging. Honestly speaking, it still feels. I was drinking before. It's already 1 o'clock in Spain.
Yeah,
it's perfect for aging. It still feels like a little bit young for me. This 2015, but yeah, already complex. Great one.
What I'm liking it by comparison to the Imperial, the one thing that's standing out quite distinctively for me as a difference is the minerality in the Vina Real. And it's definitely showing a certain mouthfeel and a certain texture that's super interesting in comparison to the Imperial. It's definitely more nuanced at this stage. And certainly an easier drink at an earlier stage, whereas the Imperial, I think one should bury for another 10 years or so. How do you feel about that, about the cellaring?
Yeah, actually, because the difference of the acidity on its origin, Imperial has probably a slightly higher in acidity. So that's why it needs to be really softened with a lot of fine goods to be perfect for drinking. Actually, we are now releasing in the market the Imperial Gran Reserva 2016. So we are kind of a little bit rushing the vintages because honestly speaking, that's true. The demand is pretty high for these wines. So sometimes we have to, the wine is totally sold out pretty soon. And it's true. Imperial has a great capability for aging because of its high acidity that has to be softened time by time. And the aging on its bottle actually helps a lot and gets better with the time. Yeah.
Okay, so taking a look now at Contino, and I think the thing that I found the most fascinating when I was doing the research on this is the notion that Contino was inspired in order to produce a chateau-like wine. And I'm really interested to hear your description about that.
Exactly. We were kind of pioneers in something that in France is, of course, super common, but not in Spain. We wanted from the beginning the project of this winery was having was the first chateau style in Spain, and it continues as of now with the same philosophy. We only produce wines from our own vineyards. We have 62 nowadays vineyards located in a valley in the Ebro River, surrounded by the Ebro River. It's actually beautiful, the winery. I wish you have the opportunity to go there. It's like a beautiful chateau with all its production facilities in the middle, surrounded by olives and vineyards. And then you have the Ebro River. It's actually beautiful to see. So the production is limited only when the quality is excellent. And this is, of course, the main items of Contino, the flagship, which is the Gran Reserva. Now we are changing vintage. We are going to 2016. This wine has 94, as you explained in the presentation, the napkin points. The grape varietals that are used here, we, of course, still have a blend. In this case, 85% Tempranillo, but it has 10% Graciano, little Mazuelo, but we found Garnacha here. We didn't in Imperial and in Villarreal, but yes, in Contino. Garnacha gives this a little bit more volume to the wine, viscosity, body that helps for its aging. The altitude is not high here. We are finding wines coming from vineyards of 310 to 360 meters. It's all coming from these 62 hectares that we have close to the Ebro River. And the selection, we do here a lot of manual selection first and second, coming from the micro plots of our own state. All of these micro plots presents a lot of differences, and in terms of orientation, but in terms of soil characteristic as well. We are always, our enologist here, Jorge Navasquez, is always is obsessed in finding the perfect selection for this blend. And that actually, honestly speaking, here we have a privileged environment, so he usually finds it easily. The Tempranillo mainly comes from stony soil near the Ebro River, which allows for slower ripening, and because of the high humidity we found here. The vintage 2016, we have the vegetative cycle corresponding to the year was very difficult compared with the 15 that we tasted before and the previous one. It was very high in rains during the winter. We have a lot of showers during the winter. It was crazy. And we didn't have that much high temperatures during the summer. And at the end, what we found in this vintage 2016, that the production was higher than the previous year. Because of the temperatures, they were lower than the 2015 and 14, and the harvest begin on September, I think on the 20th of September and the 20th, and finish end of October with very cold temperatures during that harvest in 16, and luckily with a dry environment. At the end, this wine is much more aged. The acidity is higher, it's more complex. I don't know, how do you feel about the previous one?
It's so interesting, because what I wanted to ask you straight off the bat was the winemaking it's a different winemaker, and obviously he's doing his own, he's going his own way. Could you define a difference in approach between the CVNE, Imperial and Vina and Gran Reserva versus the Contino winemaking approach? Is he doing anything that's different other than, of course, the different soils?
So in CVNE, we have 7 states nowadays in Spain. There is a chief winemaker. Her name is Maria Larrea. She has been working in the winery since forever. I don't know how many years, but since the very beginning. And she is obsessed. She is actually handling directly herself Imperial and all the CVNE wines, CVNE with the U. And but then we have different winemakers in each of the different states. So Maria Larrea is the chief of all of them, and then direct manage Imperial. Her obsession is the elegance. She is trying to create a wine that is, I always say that Imperial is this kind of wine that only like real wine lovers and wine experts appreciate, because it maintains this elegance and gets better with the time, huge capability for aging, but keeping always the balance between like the oak and the fruits, and the balance in general is her obsession. And then we have Jorge Navasquez is the winemaker of Contino. This was one of the 2016 was one of the first vintage 100% handled by him. We have a previous winemaker in Contino before that has a slightly different style. Jorge is more obsessed with the varietal. He really wants to enhance the nature and the soul of each varietal. That's why he started creating since he started working in the winery many years ago, but before he had another like winemaker on top of him. Like we created the first 100% Graciano here in Spain, Contino Graciano, which is amazing. And
we had a little bit of it last year. It sold out in a heartbeat. Whatever we had of it, it just vanished immediately. It's been really interesting for us because the Contino has really only been part of our representation of CVNE for 2 years. But it's extraordinary how quickly the database has embraced Contino as a style and as a subset of what CVNE does in general terms. It's been enormously successful. I think the thing that I'm pulling out of the wine sitting where I am here is there's a certain wildness, a sort of mulberry, an earthiness, an underbrush that it comes from the Contino Gran Reserva that isn't evident in the others. And I guess that's all about soil. And how I guess the Garnacha is having quite a lot to do with that as well.
A lot. The percentage is not representative, it's not that high, but of course it has a touch here.
Yeah.
And otherwise, this wine is aged for 56 months, so much more than the other two. And it will be impossible like to obtain this kind of surprising characteristics without this exact blend. It enhances like the style of Tempranillo, but with much more body. And with much more structure, I'll say. It is strong in tannins, you can see. but still is silky on the palate and smooth when you drink it, but much more herbal notes, balsamic notes that create something totally different compared with the two previous one. I don't know, how do you feel, but it's a very
it's definitely it's from the family very clearly. It embodies what Kuna is about, but certainly has its own point of view, and a relevant point of view from a sales point of view. People just love it. But you must make more Graciano. It's been very popular with our guys when we could get it.
I'm always telling that.
Yeah.
Maria, I've got a question for you, because I noted your comment earlier when we looked at the Imperial. You sort of said that the tannins were soft and etc. I don't see that. I think the tannins are still quite pronounced, but not in a bad way. I think they're coming together very nicely. And then as we move up the scale, so the Imperial has a good tannic structure. The Vina Real is even more tannic, and then the Contino is even more tannic, right? But getting back to your comment, obviously everyone's got their own individual preferences, but when do you see as the ideal window, or what does the winery see as the ideal window for consumption when those tannins integrate fully and we get to the sweet spot for the wines?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer.
Oh, sorry.
The ideal window really depends on the taste of each person. It really depends. For me, honestly speaking, in terms of Imperial, this wine is still too young. I will wait a little bit more.
I agree.
It is a wine that really needs like more time to settle and balance all the flavors, because it's really complex, not in terms of tannins and stuff, but in all the flavors and that appears on the mouth. Ideal, I'll say, when we launch to the market, this is what I have to say, but really depends on each person's taste.
So I guess if one sorry
Rob, I'm just trying to get, I mean, it's wonderful to see this sort of tannic structure, because frankly, everyone seems to be walking away from this sort of structure these days. Unfortunately, as there's a rush to get things commercially to market ASAP. I'm just trying to figure out, these are the 15s are what now, 7 years old, right? At what point do those tannins integrate so that they're, at the moment, they're quite showy. They're still quite dominant, even in the Imperial. To me, it's quite dominant. So at what point does it stop dominating and just be part of the structure? So, framing rather than leading.
The one thing I could add to that question is I tasted the 11 a lot. I drank too much of it over the last, when we had it. So there was a definite come to Jesus moment with the 11 where it decided to all come together. And it wasn't so long ago. It was at the most a year ago. I kept tasting it, thinking, what's the fuss? What's the fuss? Loving the 10, but the 11 just seemed just an irascible child. And then suddenly it happened. So maybe, I don't know, 20 years, 15 years?
I think it'll be less than that. But Maria, what's your view? When do these tannins start to settle down?
So for me, from vintage 10, I'll say 10, 11, 12, even the vintage 12 is already okay for me. I already found this point since the vintage 12 onwards, like 10 to 12, I'll say, where everything is already integrated, already settled down, already on its maximum expression of the wine. It is not yet what this wine is. Of course, it's excellent and it's super fresh and super young. But for me, when I think in Imperial and this balance and this silkiness, I will say, 10, 11, 12.
Yep. Okay.
So maybe if we tried to summarize it, and Pablo and Maria, maybe you can tell me if I'm on the wrong track. Tempranillo is defining the nature of Gran Reserva. We've looked today at 100% Tempranillo. And it has a very different role to play when it's not blended with other wines. When it's in its purest sense, its personality and its style varies drastically from the other examples that we've looked at. The introduction of Garnacha, a little bit in the 200 Monges, and a little bit in the Contino from Cune, definitely has a definite point of view with a very little percentage involvement. Altitude, very important. The cooler regions are showing a nuance in style that seems to emulate what all these wineries are talking about in terms of moving away from wines that are defined purely by oak and looking more at wines that are defined by the sub-sites or the sub-climates, mesoclimates of the various productions. I think that for me personally tonight, the Muga was the one that I was least crazy about in terms of its oak dominance as a style. I found the other five to be way more interesting in terms of nuance and point of view for the evening. I'm not sure what the rest of the group looks like. Let's have a look. Maybe we should do the traditional. I'm going to ask Lou to do the traditional question and ask the two representatives of the wineries our usual wine question.
It's my moment. Oh, okay. All right.
Actually, Lou, before you go, can I ask one question? Is that okay?
Yeah, of course.
To me, Ribera and Spain in general is two grapes, right? Tempranillo and Garnacha. Why do you even start blending these? I don't understand that. Why do you need to blend these grapes? I mean, why don't you have a single varietal Tempranillo or a single varietal Garnacha?
Should I reply from my side?
Yeah, Maria, please.
Well, Maria better. Cune, they use this more, maybe.
Actually, we also have a winery in Ribera. So Ribera is much more oriented, Ribera del Duero, for a monovarietal, 100% Tempranillo. But in Rioja, most of the wines that we see is blended, of course. It's a basic done by Tempranillo with usually like Tempranillo plus Garnacha. Most of the wines that we see coming from Rioja are more or less 85% Tempranillo with a 15% Garnacha. There are different blends as the ones that we tasted today, because the magic of Rioja region is not only from the location, it's also from the vinification techniques and the blend, like the art is on the blend itself. Not only like the great quality is really good and it's amazing, but we have a lot of like different styles of wines here depending on the blend that is used and all the vinification, the oak that you use, the aging that the wine has, and so on. And the magic here is exactly like the powerful and the soul of Tempranillo, but with the alcoholic touch, the viscosity, the body that Garnacha gives, with the punch of Graciano and so on. And this is the magic of Rioja, in my opinion.
Any more questions from the floor? Pablo, how do you guys feel?
I think that's a wonderful explanation. I think that maybe the winemakers have different tools to try to get the wine to have the character they are looking for, the characters. So Graciano can give some of these aspects, like the aroma, or maybe the Grenache can help get it more full body. So what they do is gets many different tools and blend them, trying to find the profile they're looking for. But yeah, in Ribera del Duero, we don't use that much. So we are always looking at the oaking process in order to get these profiles instead. But I wanted to say, now I take the opportunity that Robert, next time you have to tell me in advance, so I can have one bottle of each, and I can do the tasting as well.
Oh, see, yeah, definitely. In fact, you should have all six. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was lucky to be able to visit Cune Imperial last year. It was great, Maria. So I recommend all of you, if you have the chance, to visit both of our wineries. And in Cune, they have actually this wine bar with the Cora beans, so you get to try all of them, and they are great wines also. So thank you all of you for today, and if you have any questions, I think we are open to answer, of course.
Thanks so much.
All right, so I'm going to finish this off now. So
Yep.
we have a tradition whereby we ask our guests what they like to drink when no one's watching, they don't have to answer, and they're just relaxing. So what do you reach for out of your wine fridges or out of your cellars when you're just looking to have a wine that you can relax and enjoy? Maria, you first.
Oof. So again, very difficult question because it really depends on the moment. I actually I have access to a lot of wines of the world, not only the Spanish wine, because you know, we also have importers. Yeah, of course. But I'm a Spanish wine lover, honestly speaking. Nowadays, I'm very into white wines. So it really depends on the moment of my life. I just got a kid recently. I'm very relaxed. I don't know. I'm from Galicia. I'm drinking white wines these days. I have a stage of my life where I was drinking a lot of bubbles, a lot of sparkling, a lot of champagne, and other sparklings of the world. But now I'm drinking much more whites on its lees with a lot of like viscosity and lees style. I'm drinking a lot of Godello. So that's the reality of what I'm drinking these days when I get relaxed. Don't think on a Gran Reserva, very structured and stuff. But I love, of course. But my reality is when I want to be relaxed, I drink a very cold bottle of Godello.
Fantastic.
Cool.
Pablo?
I love Godello. I also have a house in Galicia. I love it in Tria de Muros. Maybe Maria knows.
Yeah.
And well, but I get to travel a lot in my work. Now in Budapest, in Hungary, and I love it when I land in a different universe of wine. So here in Hungary, I have like 22 appellations. I was yesterday at the wine bar and I was trying different appellations. I was meeting Laszlo, who's a guy who knows a lot, explaining not only the Tokai, but many other places like the Sentis. I cannot even pronounce them. I was taking pictures, listening to him, learning about the Hungarian barrels. So I feel quite fascinated about all the Eastern European world of wines. I think it's quite unexplored, like the Feteasca Negra from Romania, the Mabrut from Bulgaria. There's so many potential to maybe bring to Europe as well.
Yep.
Well, Pablo, next time, and Maria, next time you're in Singapore, I'll introduce you to a little Thai Riesling that I discovered the other day, and I was all ready to throw rocks at it, but no, it's really interesting how it's not an old world wine, but so much experimentation in the wine world these days, and so much new stuff coming, some good, some not so good, but an ongoing adventure, I guess.
Sure, no doubt. I'm planning to go to Singapore soon in September and November, so let's
Bravo.
do something.
Yeah,
sure.
Let's do that. I'd love that. We'll get a little dinner and invite everyone here tonight to come and join us as well. All right, everybody, thanks so much for joining us. Next week, we're doing the Standish 2020s. If anyone wants to join that online tasting. Maria, Pablo, thank you so much for your generosity in helping us sponsor tonight to keep the cost affordable.
Our pleasure.
It was very generous of you, and I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Un placer, Pablo. Thank you, everybody.
Muchas gracias.
Hasta luego.
Adiós. Adiós.
Adiós. Ciao.
Bye.
Thank you.